name's Sophie Foster, and welcome to Can We Talk About That, the podcast where we break down gender-based violence in our everyday lives. For this week's episode, I'm sitting down with Deidre MacDonald, the Executive Director of WERC, Women's Employment Resource Center, here in Oxford County. Before we get into today's episode, I do just want to make a quick note that we are going to be talking about things like trauma, violence, and abuse. If at any point you need to take a break or maybe come back later, please feel free at any point to stop the episode. We just want you to take care of yourself while you listen or watch. If you or maybe someone you know needs support, please feel free to call the Domestic Abuse Services Oxford Crisis Line or DASO's Crisis Line. The toll-free number is 1-800-265-1938. It's open 24/7, it's free, and it's confidential. For today's episode, we're with Deidre MacDonald, the Executive Director of the Women's Employment Resource Center in Oxford County. So today's episode is called More Than a Paycheck, How Employment and Gender-Based Violence Are Connected.
Yeah.
This is a super interesting topic, and I think you're right. I think that a lot of people don't necessarily think that they're connected, but there's many ways.
Right.
So I'm excited to have you on to kind of unpack how that shows up.
Yeah, we're excited.
Can you explain maybe a little bit more of what Women's Employment Resource Center does generally, and then we can kind of connect it back to how it's related to gender-based violence?
Yeah, for sure. So the Women's Employment Resource Center was actually founded like 35 years ago, so we're in our 35th year. We're located downtown Woodstock, and we support all those who identify as women with employment supports. So a big misconception is that we're a placement agency. We are contracted through London Regional Employment Services, who essentially is contracted under Employment Ontario. So we support people through all different stages through employment, from being unemployed and looking for work to being employed and looking for career change. We do the cover letter, resume, basic support to supporting interview and like mock interview support, and job matching. So we try to connect with local employers on getting people connected to the right spots. So we deal with people who have been unemployed for a long time. We've been supporting people who may, jump around from job to job, or we support people who just have never had a job, right? So a lot of different diversity in people's employment needs, and we help navigate all of that.
Yeah, that must be really interesting.
Yeah, and again, like how certain aspects of people's lives come into that, right? Homelessness or like housing, life stabilization to food, and then definitely with gender-based violence.
Yeah. Well, and fun fact is that WERC, Women's Employment Resource Center, started from Ingamo.
And we did. And that's so cool. And I've recently come across some incredible pictures for circa 91. So
love it.
We were founded by Ingamo as it was identified that obviously with transitional housing, the barrier of somebody finding then a job, right? And so back when they were founded, funding always came into factor, and WERC ended up coming out on their own entity. And WERC's been a lot of different things throughout the years, which has been incredible to see. And their evolution has always continued to be employment supports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you can see, as we keep going with this conversation, kind of how WERC started connected to the gender-based violence field, and it's continues to kind of touch that and support people suffering and struggling with it. Yeah, so to start, maybe for folks who might not see how it's connected, how are they linked?
Yeah, that's very fair, right? A lot of people don't see the correlation between gender-based violence and how keeping a job can become very difficult. And when you think of gender-based violence, it can come down to that coercion and control piece, where somebody's partner may not want them to leave the home or gain more friends, or that financial control where they don't want them to have their own finances. So it really comes down to those being very surface level items. But then when somebody is going through something within their relationship and going to work, they could be getting like harassed on the job. So it could come down to retention and attendance. Employers I think need to do some research for themselves and how to keep their employees safe for signs for gender-based violence within their employees. Somebody constantly calling in or taking personal phone calls or text messages might be a sign that something more than just personal emergencies could be happening. And from a coworker standpoint, you could see somebody's absences as frustrating, right? You're constantly covering their shifts and things like that. And when it comes down to it, what's the why, right? And in today's economic climate, right, not a lot of people can be without a job, right? Those call-ins are probably a very difficult decision to make. And it all leads to keeping a job. Right? People are let go because too many absences, right? And, people are put on performance reviews because they're using their phone or, things like that, right? And often, again, when you're dealing with those situations, people retreat, right? People don't want people to know that they're going through those situations. So they'll often choose sometimes to leave the job themselves because they don't want their partner to track them down. They don't want them to be showing up at work. They don't want to draw attention to the situation, and it can become really difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you think about it, we spend most of our time at home and at work.
Right.
So if you're not at home, with the person who's maybe being abusive with you, work's kind of a big opportunity for the people around you to kind of see what's going on and hopefully step in.
Well, and, the partner who is dealing with the abuse, right? They could be gaining friends within their relation, like their coworkers and things like that. So their partner could be seeing those close relationships as a threat, right? And so they don't want anyone to kind of figure out what's going on or take control or convince the person to leave. And I've even unfortunately heard of situations where people are working and all of their paychecks are going into that other person's account, right? They don't even have control over their own money. So that can be really difficult.
Yeah, that's really hard.
Right? That financial abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You touched on it a little bit just in your introduction there, but what kind of barriers do you see survivors facing when it comes to either getting a new job or keeping their job?
So keeping their job, right, it's that safety planning with the employer. And that's if the employer is aware of what's going on, right? Has it been disclosed to the employer what the employee is going through? And at that point, the employer really does have a duty to protect the employee, safety planning, and what control measures could they maybe put in place to help support their employee, but also educating themselves, right? They should seek like HR advice or legal counsel themselves on just where they can go with that, right? They obviously don't want to overstep or include themselves too far into the situation without permission from the client. Can we redo that one?
Sure.
Okay. I was like, I'm so used to referring to people as client, but it's employee.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. I might ask you to like briefly describe what Women's Employment Resource Center does.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because I introduced you, but then I was like, oh, we should say what it does.
Yeah, okay, we can do that.
Okay. Maybe I'll ask that now. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then I'll shift into like what barriers do you see?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you touch on what kind of barriers survivors face maybe when it comes to either getting a new job or keeping the job that they have?
Yeah, so I mean, survivors definitely are taking all the steps that they can, right? The services that are provided, and it really can come down to like whether or not they are in a stable living environment, which can be a barrier to them keeping a job, right? Can they get to and from work? That transportation piece. Do they have reliable childcare? Unfortunately, again, with gender-based violence, childcare becomes such a barrier for people who then are becoming single parents and things like that. So those are really just the top three, just breaking the surface of what
Yes.
barriers people really face, but it can come down to do they even have shoes or work pants, or have they had to leave everything behind, and are they starting over? So thankfully that we have supports provided and on site to help people through some of those things, but it's difficult to ask for help, right? Making those first few steps to kind of get into that. For people who have a job, it's really, again, as you're coming through that survivor piece, how do you keep a job when you don't really know your next step, right? And keeping a job can feel so overwhelming, right? Do people even have a way to wake themselves up in the morning, right? That alarm clock piece. And it really is something that I think people really overlook in all the components, right? We really do take advantage of a roof over our head and food on the table sometimes, when a lot of people don't have that luxury.
Yeah, and even thinking about, going through court can be years long processes.
Years, right?
And how do you continue doing your job thinking about, mental health or the trauma of maybe seeing the person who's been abusive to you over and over again in court? Those are really hard things to think about in terms of keeping a job.
Right, and with employment, how do you continuously ask for that time off?
Yeah, that
right?
too.
Do you have an employer that's understanding that you're going through that? Do they even know, right?
Yeah.
And when you're asking for time off to see your lawyer or to go to court and things like that, it takes time away from your job, right? And we did see, a lot of more remote work happen through the pandemic, obviously, but things are transitioning back, and that's become a really big barrier for people, because now childcare and transportation and all those things that weren't necessarily a barrier before are now being seen again. So
it's so hard. There's so many ways that there's just so many barriers. Can you talk more about the role too, about how financial control can kind of play a role in this, and how that piece in an abusive relationship can really impact employment?
Definitely. Like I had mentioned, where people might have their paychecks going into their partner's accounts, and so they don't even have access to their money themselves. But if they need to use the car for gas and this and that, the financial piece, again, is seen in so many different areas. Are they even able to get clothing to go to work? And when somebody knows that they're going to work and they don't get to have access to their funds, the mental impact on them is so significant, right? And it's one thing to have shared expenses and things like that, but when we talk about financial control, the person may not have any access to their funds. And so we could see people jumping from job to job because, they want to try and get a position that maybe they don't have to hand in over their money, positions that maybe pay cash instead of direct deposit, and things like that can become barriers for sure.
Well, and just thinking too of, you mentioned diversity earlier, even thinking about people who haven't worked, maybe people who've gone on mat leave, and then their relationships become abusive, and then they're trying to find their way back to employment. Or maybe immigrants coming to Canada in an abusive relationship, and then they need to find a way through that in a country where they don't have any family or friends.
Right.
That's a big thing that seems to be,
it really
coming
is.
up.
It really is. And, a big part of that is that people are trying to gain some independence to have a job and contribute and things like that. And if their relationship is controlling themselves plus their finances, it can be very frustrating, right? And we've seen, unfortunately, situations where people are trying to find a job just to support their kids, right? The roof over their head may be there, but the additional supports aren't. And like you said, you can see all the different situations to people trying to return to work or haven't had a job history at all, or maybe no working experience in Canada, which already are barriers to getting a job in general, let alone the factor of the gender-based violence. Yeah,
it just brings a whole new thing. So let's kind of think about, the positive side of the work that you do.
For sure.
And because it can create a huge opportunity for people. So why do you think employment is such a big piece of the puzzle for someone getting out of an abusive relationship?
Right.
And how does it become, this huge opportunity that people can access by getting a new job?
Right. I think, one, you're gaining that independence, right?
Yep.
If you're leaving that situation, this is giving you a step to independence. You're gaining control of the situation yourself, right? You're taking that back. I think one incredibly beautiful thing about working at WERC is you see how people have built their confidence. You've seen them build their resiliency. And, as much as we try to support internally as much as possible, we really rely on our community partners to kind of work through other barriers that we can't deal with internally. So even seeing our community come together to support somebody on those pieces are really, really great to see. And when somebody is dealing with a situation like that, and they're able to gain employment and they're getting on their feet more independently, it really does come together nicely.
And how do you find that you maybe recognize that someone is struggling in an abusive relationship? Do they usually come in and say, they see it and they say, I need a new job, I got to get out of this bad relationship? Or is it, you start seeing signs?
Both. To be honest, both. We've unfortunately and fortunately have had people comfortable enough to come to us and say, like, listen, this is the deal and I need out. And from there, we would do an immediate intervention just to ensure the person is safety planning and we can get them into a safe place. There is a registration to our service, and through that, it does ask questions about how someone feels safe. And sometimes it takes some reflection on those questions before someone feels comfortable to answer, right? We're asking a lot of questions right from the beginning, and it's really about building a relationship together, right? And so sometimes it's after the fact and people come to us and explain their situation. It's not until maybe they do some of our gender-based violence education with our workshops that they even realize that maybe that they're in an abusive relationship.
And then they've got the long journey of kind of processing.
Yeah, what's next, right? And so we help with what's next. We work within our community resources to kind of build that step.
Yeah. Well, and the visual that I use for the podcast in the opening and all the videos that I post is this puzzle kind of coming together.
Yeah.
And so work is one of the puzzle pieces that kind of comes together in the hope that we can catch people in this social safety net of, all the different ways that violence and abuse can impact your life. Yeah. So employment is a huge piece. Yeah. And if we can, help in that, that's just a huge opportunity of change.
For sure. Yeah. And, being that safe place that maybe people need to navigate a little bit on their own, and then we're here for anything more, right? And I think that that's what's always given WERC a little bit of that exception.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you see differences maybe in the clients that you work with in the needs between maybe younger women versus older women versus people from Oxford County and newcomers? To be honest, all around. It's unfortunately, in a sense, kind of everybody's in the bubble together. We don't see any differences or more people of a different demographic than others. And I think that that's something that people don't think of often either is, it's not age related. It's not whether or not you're new to Canada or whether you're local. It's happening to everybody. And it really comes down to the education of the system, right? And it just unfortunately comes into so many different aspects. Yeah. Well, and I brought that up in another episode too, talking about, this does happen to everyone. It's not... I think sometimes people think maybe it's like a poverty issue. No, it's not. Well, and that's just it, right? It really is coming across the whole umbrella of people. It's just people in general. We're all dealing with that situation. And you're right. I think that there unfortunately are the misconceptions that it's related to a certain demographic. And it really isn't. What would you say maybe that you look for in workplaces that you're trying to set your clients up with to make sure that it's safe, to make sure that it's supportive for survivors?
For sure. We've worked with many employers on like a very long-term basis, and we have ongoing relationships with them. But if we're looking at making a new partnership, there are obviously the assessment and paperwork piece of our funder expectations. But we meet with them, and we meet with them in person and have conversations and better understand their workplace culture. We have the clients go in to become an employee, and they give us feedback too, right? And we help be that kind of go-between if they're having concerns, but we would never put somebody in a situation that they don't feel safe in, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So let's say, just for fun, hypothetical situation. I'm putting Deidre on the spot here. Yeah. Let's say I want to come to work and access some supports. Yeah. So I walk in. What does it look like?
For sure. So we would do like an eligibility screening with you. Are you 18 years and older? Are you eligible to work in Canada? And then we kind of go from there. So if you're eligible, we would book you an intake appointment and link you with one of our employment consultants. The intake takes about 45 minutes, and it's just a series of questions, and then you're registered. If you're not eligible, like if those within that criteria, we do have drop-in sessions that we've kind of put in place to help people still get that resume cover letter support and things like that if we can't maybe bring you on as a registered client, just so we're still meeting the needs of everybody. And once you're a registered client, then we help you kind of map your journey. We would want to see you at least like every other week, once a month at minimum. And really at that point, we're working through what are your barriers? Is your cover letter resume working well for you? Is it not working well for you? Tips on how to apply to jobs. We do light support with that job search piece, but really making sure people are equipped to kind of move forward. We do have our workshops that run, and highly encourage everybody to participate, because that's where you can kind of build like your skills and your confidence and your resiliency. And from there, you would connect with the job developer, and really like utilizing all of the people at the table, just to ensure everybody's getting the support that they need.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like access to like a free coach kind of thing?
I mean, in a way, we definitely, like, at one point, like, job coaches, I'm sure, were a title of the employees there. We've kind of migrated to employment consultant. Okay. Because in a sense, like, we really consult on many different aspects. And the great thing about WERC is that the staff on board really have, like, a very wide range and diverse work experience themselves. So we really leverage each other's skills on, system navigation, HR support, career counseling and coaching, and we really just kind of bring that piece in and to help that person with literally every aspect, right? Mm-hmm. Like, do you need referrals and things like that to other community partners, but what maybe are the barriers that you face, mm-hmm. right? And how to overcome those things, and then connecting to our employers if it makes sense, right? And mm-hmm. kind of go from there.
And this is a free service, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I think that is a great piece too, is that it doesn't cost you anything to walk in the door, and even calling or emailing us, like if you're not ready to maybe do that in-person piece, people do things slow sometimes, and we can meet people where they're at for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe to wrap up our episode, to finish off strong.
Yeah.
Maybe for someone listening, or for someone who's supporting someone who maybe is struggling, especially around work, where should they start?
To be honest, we always refer over to DASO, mm-hmm. just calling and asking questions. I watched the episode recently with Eden, and what does it look like when you call DASO, right? And it's just important to call and ask questions. And the DASO website honestly is great too, that when you're looking for that information, there's that quick exit button. So if, you don't want people to know what you're doing, you can kind of quickly close out the page. And, we do really rely on our partnership with them to really help us move forward. Our biggest piece though is when we're talking to people in those situations or asking us those hypotheticals, are you safe? Do we need to do anything a little bit more than that? Do we need to connect with like Woodstock Police or anything like that to keep the person safe in our building? If there are identified safety risks, we lock our building and we take the needed precautions internally to help that person. But if someone's just not sure, right, just needs to ask questions, they can always reach out to us too, and we can help encourage people to reach out to our community partners. And asking questions is where people start, but it's also the biggest step.
It's a huge step.
Saying it out loud, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's part of the hope with the podcast is hopefully we can, have better access and understanding of the services we do have.
For sure.
So that we can ask the questions and get the resources that we have in our community for free.
But, I don't know about you, but I know when I talk to my family and friends, they're like, we didn't know that was a thing, right?
All the time.
So, it's even when you've been in the system for so long, it changes. Programs start and end.
Yep.
But, again, it's asking the question, which is really the first step, which is sometimes the hardest. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the episode and coming on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And we hope that this episode was helpful.
Yeah.
And maybe you can start asking some questions.
Love it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Can We Talk About That? A big thank you to Deidre for coming on and sharing her insights into workplace and just job placement and the resources that WERC offers. If anything in this conversation brought something up for you and you need some support, please feel free to call the DASO crisis line. The toll-free number is 1-800-265-1938. Again, it's free, confidential, and it's open 24/7. We'll be back with more conversations that help to break down gender-based violence on our podcast, Can We Talk About That?